believe we last left off with the Marshall Plan. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sam, did you watch the video on your own?
Yep.
Okay, so Sam, why don't you start us off? What is the Marshall Plan?
So the Marshall Plan is essentially the U.S. like giving Europe money to rebuild so that then they don't get taken over by communists.
Good, good. All right, so Maddie, give me another reason why the U.S. is doing this. One is so they don't get taken over by communists. That is correct, right? What's the other reason?
Okay, like Sam said, to rebuild Europe, but also to to rebuild Europe, prevent communism, and hope that it comes back to us.
Yeah, that's good. How is it going to come back to us? How's it going to come back to us? Are the Europeans going to pay us back?
No, but like you said last time, we just put out a bunch of money and hope that it's money to spend, so those countries will be built back up eventually, and the trade will benefit us.
Yeah, there we go. That's the key. That's the key. And make sure you have it in your notes that one of the reasons why the US is doing the Marshall Plan is A, to make sure that Western Europe doesn't fall to communism, right? B, to rebuild them just because it's a good thing to do to your friends to help them out, right? When they need help. Okay. And C, because helping them will help us because it will be trade, right? We're not asking the Europeans to pay us back. In fact, we won't have them pay us back at all. But it's the trade that will help us, right? That they're gonna, start buying our stuff again. Cool. Okay. So the Cold War is going to get progressively colder here. As the Soviet Union starts to act more aggressively, we're going to found NATO. So let's make it our next letter. I think it's G. That sounds about correct.
G. Yeah, G, right?
Sounds good. Okay. Hey, Emma, how's it going?
Going good. It's going good.
All right. So G is NATO. NATO, it stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Treaty or tree?
Treaty.
Okay.
Treaty. I would like to join the North Atlantic Tree Organization.
I was really confused. I'm like, this is a strange organization.
They're just like, that's a sycamore. That's an oak. Just like, just recognizing trees. They all meet in like a tree house in the top, right? They have like a rope ladder that they pull up. That would be more entertaining, but no, that's not this. So NATO is a military alliance. It's a defense pact amongst all the blue countries on our map here. It means that any of the member countries, if any member country is attacked, then all countries defend it. If any country is attacked, then all countries defend it. Okay. So during the Cold War, if you look on the right side of the screen, you'll see this one where I have Warsaw Pact and NATO. This is what NATO looked like during the Cold War. The one on the bottom is what NATO looks like today. Okay, so today they've added more countries into NATO, right? But back then, this is the way it was. Okay. This is going to go a long way to protecting Europe from the Soviet Union, protecting Europe from the scary Soviet Union. The Soviets then create something in a response, something called the Warsaw Pact, which is the Soviet side of it. That's the Soviet alliance of all these countries here.
What does O stand for again? So
the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Organization, okay.
All right, so NATO is going to be the primary way that the United States does like military stuff all the way till today, right? After 9/11, we invoked NATO and we said that the Afghanistanis had attacked us on 9/11, the Taliban had attacked us. And so when we went into Afghanistan, we brought NATO with us. The NATO countries came with us and the NATO countries fought with us and they went into Afghanistan, right? And that included like the Dutch and the Germans and the Italians and the Brits and the Spaniards and stuff. And they all sent troops into Afghanistan with us because the US had been attacked, right?
Poland didn't have,
Say it again.
too bad Poland didn't have that support in World War II.
Yeah, no kidding. Poland is forced into the Warsaw Pact in this time period. Today, Poland is a member of NATO. In fact, Poland is a very active member of NATO. Poland is really pro-America, really pro-NATO, really pro anything that hurts Russia.
They're just like, you know what, we had enough. We've had enough.
Yeah, Poland's like, neutrality doesn't work for us. We need friends with big guns. Yeah. Okay. You'll notice here that Turkey is a member, right? Turkey is a member. Turkey is always anti-Russian. Turkey and Russia have been to war like 10 times in their history. And so Turkey will join anything that's anti-Russian, right? But this is a big deal because Turkey controls the waterways for the Russian Navy. This means that the Soviet Navy has to pass through Turkish land to get to it, right? It's going to be a real problem. It's going to be a problem. Okay. Broadly speaking, the whole world gets divided into the West and the East. We talked a little bit about this, right? But here's your color coding for the world. The blue countries are the West. They're the pro-democracy countries, the pro-US countries. The red countries are the East, the pro-communist countries. This is broadly speaking. There's other countries that are going to be in the alliance here. Japan and South Korea they should both be blue. I'm not sure why they're not, but they should both be blue. And a lot of Latin America is a lot of these gray countries where it's not clear. It's not clear what side they're going to be on. Some of the time it's because both the Americans and the Soviets are like trying to overthrow the government. So Iran is a good example of that, right? Both the Americans and the Soviets are trying to overthrow the government. And so Iran at different times is like kind of torn between two sides, right? A lot of the African countries are kind of torn between. A lot of the Latin American countries are kind of torn.
Is Brazil part of NATO?
No, it's not part of NATO. NATO is just these countries down here. So the US, Canada, and then all these European countries. Yeah. Brazil wants nothing to do with world wars. Brazil's like, oh, hell no, right? Brazil like lives way down here in the corner. Brazil's like, you guys fight up there. We're gonna be cool. We've got Carnival to plan for, right? Okay. All right, so the Cold War is going to become real very, very quickly because in 1948, Stalin blocks Berlin. So here's the tricky thing. The city of Berlin is right here in the middle of the Soviet section, right? And the city of Berlin gets divided. So there's a little bit of chunk on this map here. This is all West Germany, and the little black section here is also West Germany. Yeah, Sam?
Is this a new letter?
Yeah, make it a new letter. Sorry. H, make it H. Okay, so Stalin recognizes that after World War II, they divided the city of Berlin, and Stalin's pretty pissed about that. He never wanted them to divide the city of Berlin. He thinks it's unfair. The Soviets took Berlin, right? The Americans and the Brits never even made it to Berlin, right? So Stalin thinks that's a bunch of crap. And he thinks that Berlin should be totally Soviet territory, right? So he actually is going to enact something called the blockade, the Berlin blockade. This is where he blocks off all trains, all roads, all shipments in and out. And he's trying to starve the Berliners to death. He's trying to starve them out because it's a city, right? They can't make their own food. They can't make their own stuff, right? So he's trying to block them off and starve them to death. And he's trying to get them to just surrender and join Eastern Germany, right?
I guess you could say he Stalin.
I hate myself for laughing. Okay, so okay, so the Americans do something called the Berlin Airlift. And what we do is we basically just start flying plane after plane after plane after plane after plane full of stuff like food, medicine, supplies, right? Everything that the city of Berlin needs, right? This is going to become a big, huge deal, huge deal for the Berliners and for the Americans. It's going to be this like kind of public relations kind of victory, right? We're going to have very famous. There's going to be like candy bombers, right? Where they're like Air Force bomber jets, and then they would fly over, and then they would push out pallets filled with candy, and it had like big parachutes on them and stuff, right? And it would come down, and all the kids would run over and get the candy and stuff like that. The Berlin airlift lasts for about a year or so. Excuse me. Excuse me. Jeez Louise. It's not coronavirus, it's a potato chip that I didn't quite swallow all the way. Okay, so this lasts for about a year before Stalin finally gives up. He finally gives up because it's like it's making him look really bad in the news. It makes him look really bad. It makes him, the Americans are getting this kind of victory. And Berlin is going to exist for the next like 40 years. Berlin is going to exist as this like city removed from a country, right? Where it's this like little island of Western Europe, a little island of Western Germany in a sea of Eastern communist Germany. It's going to be tricky. Yeah, it's going to be really tricky. But Stalin will allow like supplies to come in and stuff eventually. Stalin's going to die pretty soon. He dies in 51, I think. He dies pretty soon, relatively soon, early 50s. All right, so what the heck is going on in the Civil War, or in the Cold War, okay? The Cold War is all of these different conflicts. If you're looking around here on the map here, all of these different conflicts. Yeah, go ahead and make it another letter. We're going to call the next letter Cold War conflicts. We're going to make this one a pretty big one. Cold War conflicts. So these are all different conflicts all over the world, right? And they all have something to do with the Cold War. Okay. At a certain point, communists start backing up one side, Democrats, Americans start backing up the other side. I don't want to say Democrat. I don't want you to think that this is Democrat like a political party. It's not. It's democracy, right? So the Western countries and Eastern countries are doing this. Some of the biggest examples, the Chinese Civil War is probably the biggest one. The Chinese Civil War, look at these dates. The Chinese have been at civil war basically from 1927 to 1949. They took a break to be invaded by Japan. So they didn't actually take a break. They got invaded by Japan, right? And the Chinese Civil War is nasty. It's nasty. It's all over China. This is one of these things. China never gets a Marshall Plan. It never gets rebuilt after World War II, partly because they just didn't prioritize it. They didn't have the money for it. They only had the money to rebuild Europe and Japan. They didn't have the money to rebuild China, partly. The other part of it is because it wasn't clear who was going to win, right? Are the Democrats going to win with Chiang Kai-shek, or are the communists going to win with Mao Zedong, right? Spoiler alert, Mao's going to win, right? Mao Zedong is going to win. He's going to take over. And Chiang Kai-shek leaves China and goes to Taiwan. This is our birth of Taiwan here. So Chiang Kai-shek is leading the Republic of China, and that's the Democratic China. And he moves to Taiwan. The official name for Taiwan is the Republic of China. And they will argue that they are the true China, the true government of China that's been driven out of China, okay? The big China that we all know of, that's called the People's Republic of China. That's the communist China. They argue that they're the real China. And they argue that Taiwan is actually part of them. Okay, this is going to be a huge conflict with China. This is a conflict all the way till today. China claims Taiwan is part of it, like it's a rebellious state, right? Taiwan claims that it's completely independent, right? And that it has like all these like alliances and stuff with with the US and with other countries, right? Taiwan has a democratic government. Taiwan acts independent. It has its own navy. It has its own army, right? In every way that counts, Taiwan is independent. But China is constantly undermining them and constantly trying to exert control over them. Okay. This is going to be one of these flashpoints that are going to be like almost war, like over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. The other big war that starts off is the Korean War. Should we make Korean War its own name, its own number? I don't know. Will it make Sam feel better?
I don't know, whatever you want.
I think you leave it. Leave it as this number. We're just going to call this big number is all going to be all Cold War conflicts.
Cold War? Okay.
Korean War breaks out in 1950 and it lasts for 3 years. And it's, if you look here, we're going to lose 200,000 people. So we lost 400,000 in World War II. We're going to lose 200,000 in Korea. So it gives you an idea of what's going on here, right? This is half as big as World War II is for us.
Oh my gosh.
Basically, the communists are in the north of Korea, the democracies in the south of Korea, and the United States is just pumping in soldiers and troops and weapons and stuff, trying to defend the Koreans. And the U.S. is not alone. England, Australia's in there, India's in there, Turkey's in there. A bunch of countries are all in there. Okay. England and France, they're in there a little bit, but they're mostly still trying to rebuild themselves, right? They're mostly still just falling apart. The Soviets and the Chinese are going to just start dumping soldiers into this. Okay. This war is going to become super, super nasty. The Americans fight their way almost all the way up, and then the communists fight their way almost all the way down. They get to about the halfway point, and then they're going to eventually just kind of negotiate peace, right? Technically, the war is still going on. Technically, they've never ended the war. They just negotiated a ceasefire. This is why today, North Korea and South Korea still shoot each other sometimes. Right? The North Koreans, like they sink like South Korean fishing boats and stuff, and they'll just kind of do it out of nowhere. This war is important for a couple of reasons. First, it shows us what the Cold War is going to look like. Okay, so the USSR versus the USA, we're both fighting through other countries here. We're not technically fighting the Soviets, we're fighting the Chinese and the North Koreans, right? But wink, wink, nod, nod, these planes start flying over the war, okay? This is a MiG-15. This is a Soviet plane, and it's the first jet fighter. Okay, this is an example where the Soviet military technology is jumping up fast. And it's becoming apparent that the Soviets are much stronger than we thought they were. Okay. The Korean War is an unusually large war, but we're going to get a whole bunch of these little wars going this whole time. Okay, the USA and the Soviet Union are going to back a civil war in Greece. USA is going to overthrow the government in Iran. The Soviets will overthrow the government in Cuba. The Soviets will overthrow Guatemala. Oh wait, I got to fix my spelling. My spelling's all messed up. Dang it. The Hungarian. Come on. Hungarian. Say it again. What'd you say? In the chat? Why did Korea split? Korea split because the communists were controlling the north and the democracy was controlling the south, right? And they were fighting and fighting and fighting until they just got to a point where they were just right around this line and just murdering each other on this line back and forth. And they couldn't, neither side could win. And so they finally just agreed to stop fighting. That's why it split. That's why it's split. Today, North Korea is the communist country and South Korea is the democracy.
Do you think it'll ever come back together?
They talk about it a lot. You hear about it in the news a lot. I don't know if the Koreas will come together. I'm not sure, right? I, I don't know. I'll tell you what, since I was a kid, since I was like learning about this stuff when I was a student, my teacher told me that the Koreas would come back together and that they would be unified again and stuff. I've been told that every year of my life, basically, and it's never happened. And they've never even come close. In fact, they've grown further and further apart, right? I don't know if
Mhm.
maybe in a long enough timeline they will, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Maddie is dubious about it, right? Yeah, I don't know. Kim Jong Un. I mean, so here's the problem, right? When you're dealing with these like authoritarian communist style governments, the leaders are not really attached to the people very much, right? And the leaders are generally not very popular, and oftentimes these leaders get assassinated and stuff like that, right? Like he's going to die eventually, maybe he gets killed by the military and they retake the government or something, right? Maybe the government will just collapse, or maybe it'll just stay forever. I don't know. I i i think that I will never see a unified Korea in my life. I kind of don't think it's going to happen. I mean, they've been disunified now for 70 years. That's a long time. That's a long time to be separate, right? They're very, very different people today. So maybe, I don't know.
What's it called? When
What's it called? What?
She's typing.
Mhm. You can speak. We can hear you.
oh, you can.
Yeah, you're not coming in totally clear, but everyone's brainwashed. What's it called when a country manages their recourses? Is that resources? I don't know what you mean. I don't understand the question, Manny. I don't understand what the question is asking me. Okay, if you think of it again, let me know, and I'm happy to try to answer the question if I can.
I
Um,
don't understand.
yeah, go Sam.
Like, what happened with, like, why did Virginia split into like Virginia and West Virginia and North Dakota and South Dakota, North Carolina, and like, what's it with those?
So North Carolina and South Carolina were both from the British Trading Company, where the settlers just landed on different parts of the coast, right? And then in the beginning, they just didn't have a name for it. They just said, we're going to call this Carolina. But then they were so far away that they're like, yeah, we don't want to be one thing. So they just said, all right, we'll be North and South. In the case of North Dakota, in the case of the Dakotas, the Dakota territory was just so big that they thought it's just too big, right? And so they wanted to make it smaller. And so on the day of statehood, they just cut it right down the middle and made two states out of it. In the case of Virginia and West Virginia, Virginia was one state, and then in the Civil War, West Virginia voted to stay in the nation. Virginia voted to leave the nation. And so Abraham Lincoln said, done, make a new state. Just drew a line through it and said, you're a new state now. And West Virginia's like, okay, cool. Right? Yeah. I don't know. In the case of the Carolinas and the Dakotas, there's no fight. It was just kind of the way it happened. Just kind of the way it happened. There's no fight. It was just the territory was so big that they thought it was better to cut it in half. And then they couldn't agree on who got the name Carolina. And so they both just took the name Carolina. Right? I mean, they could have maybe been like Carolina and Roanoke or something like that. They could have done a different name, but whatever. Whatever. A lot of American names kind of suck, right? Like, I feel like we could have done a better name than New Hampshire, New York, New Mexico, right? Like, I feel like we could have worked a little harder on those names.
Uh-huh.
New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, and New Mexico. I feel like we could have come up with something better. And then North, South Dakota, North, South Carolina, right? I mean, that's like 9 states, so we really could have come up with something better, right? Washington's also not a very inspired name either. That's kind of like I don't know. I feel like we could have come up with a better name, right? Something like Massachusetts, that's a good name. That's like a cool, you're not going to find that anywhere else, right?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, that's fine, right? Because it comes from William Penn's name, and they took his name and made it a mega. The Sylvania is the ending that means like land of, so it's like the land of Penn, right? That's fine. That's cool, right? It could have been like Caroline, Sylvania, right? I don't know. I'm in favor of using Native American names for the lands, right? Those are my favorite state names. They're all like Native American names, like Wisconsin and Illinois. Well, Illinois is a French name, I guess, but Wisconsin, Idaho, Wyoming, right? Those are all Utah. I think the Native American names sound better. Massachusetts, Tennessee, Mississippi, right? Those are all good names.
Mhm.
Yeah. Not a big fan of the new, north, not south.
This is Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, like, come on, man. Yeah. Anyway, back to the Cold War. Really what I want you to do, you don't need to name all of these things. You don't need to remember all of these things. We're not going to go into every single one of them. We're going to be here all day. We're going to be here for like 3 class periods if we try to do that. What you really need to understand is that this Cold War is breaking out everywhere, all over the place, right? It's breaking out across the entire world, and over and over again, we're getting this USA versus Soviet Union on one side or the other, right? One side is supporting the ruler, the other side is supporting the rebels. Sometimes the US is on the side of the rebels, sometimes the US is on the side of the ruler. Okay? The other thing I want you to understand here is that because of the Cold War, the United States is going to we're going to support a bunch of really, really bad leaders. We're going to support some bad men who are going to take over these places. And these bad guys are going to commit terrible crimes, right? We put Saddam Hussein in power, right? We put Saddam Hussein in power, and Saddam Hussein then kills like 2 million people in the Iraq War, right? We put Augusto Pinochet in power, and he kills like 60,000 people, right? In like death camps and stuff like that. So this is where the 1950s, the 1950s is going to stand in this like weird kind of like limbo zone. We're on one side, we're like maximum America, maximum US, right? We've got money, we've got power, we've got, the American dream, and Americans' lives are getting better, and there's all these things that are like super, super great about America, right? But on the other side of it, we're also like putting murderous dictators in power and holding them in power. You know what I mean? And so it's this weird, like, kind of black and white kind of dichotomy that the US is oftentimes not going to come out looking very good. Oftentimes we don't look very good, right? Probably the best example of where the America is going to get a really conflicted relationship is going to be in Vietnam. But we'll do Vietnam kind of in the next unit. Okay. I think this is a good place to stop, unless you guys have questions or problems.
I
Are you
don't
guys
think
good?
so.
Apparently we lost Sam, so
Yeah.
that's okay. Emma, you doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
Yeah. All right. We'll meet again on Thursday, and then after Thursday we'll collect notes from you guys.
Okay.
Cool.
Uh, all the World War II notes were supposed to be turned in for Q2, right?
Correct. All the World War II stuff is in Q2.
Okay, that's okay.
So this is
Was
everything
that-
past World War II.
Yeah, and then the week 1 progress, that's just like all the assignments turned in, right?
Correct. That's everything for Q3 that you add it all together. If you look on Canvas, it just adds all the points together, right? So if you have like 70 points, then I'll just put 50 points on that week 1 and then 20 points on the week 2.
What if it says missing?
If you have 0, then you turned in 0 points last week.
Okay.
right? So if you turn in, 20 points today, then I'll go through and I'll add it in and I'll put the 20 points in that week one. I usually just
Okay.
count it up as we go. Cool. So when you turn in your notes on Thursday, assuming you have done your notes, when you turn in your notes on Thursday, that'll be 50 points. I'll just put that in probably the week one, right? So week two, you need to do some assignments or something. By the end of this week, you should be at 100 points.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. If we're good, then I'll let you go. My 12th graders are in the waiting room, so I'll let them in.
Okay.
Cool. All right. I'll see you guys.